So I read a comment someplace. It's particularly a question, but I think it's worth giving giving an answer to it. So it's an interview question. Your application is running in an EKS pod and it needs to download a file from S3. How will that pod authenticate to AWS securely? Now, the way I would answer this question is I would not just give the best of the answers because there are several ways to do this, but they're definitely not equally secure. So I will take it from the worst case scenario to the best. So what's the worst option? Hard coded AWS credentials. So basically putting an access key and the secret directly inside of your application, inside of your Docker image or the source code in Git. Please do not do this. Anyone who gets access to that code or image could potentially get those credentials. You know, a slightly better option is storing the credentials as a Kubernetes secret and injecting them into the pod. Well, that is a little bit better than hard coding, but you will still have long lived AWS credentials that now need to be protected, to be monitored, and rotated. So that might not be the best option. It might not be a very good option, but at least it's better than hard coding directly in your Docker image or in Git in source code, right? And another thing, another option is giving permissions to the EC2 worker nodes IAM role. Now, this is a little bit more secure, but we're using temporary because then again, we're using temporary credentials, which is better. However, there is an issue with this because multiple pods may be running on that node, and not all of them need to have access to this credential, which automatically they will be able to interact with it, which increases the blast radius. Now, the permission is generally at the node level, which can create, as I said, a much larger blast radius than necessary. And that, of course, it violates one of the most important security principles, which is least privileges. You only give access to who or what needs the access. If you're given an IAM role, you give an IAM role with the least privilege to that pod, not the group of pods, not to the nodes, except for all of the nodes will need the kind of credential to be injected into them. So no, not injected into them. That they would need them at runtime. I mean, so what should we do instead? Now, there is one strong option, which is IRSA. I know if you've heard of it. It's an IAM role for service accounts. So basically, everybody should know what service account is, and IRSA is just that IAM role that you give to a service account. Now, with IRSA, your Kubernetes service your Kubernetes service account, of course, is associated with that IAM role. EKS uses its OIDC identity provider, so the workload can obtain temporary AWS credentials. This way, there won't be hard-coded access keys, and permissions can be scoped to the specific workload that needs them. But now, AWS now also provides EKS Pod Identity, which simplifies how IAM roles are associated with EKS workloads. Now, all you need to do is you create a pod identity association between the IAM role and the Kubernetes service account. I call it KSA. So, pods using that security, pods using the service account can retrieve and receive the temporary AWS credentials through the pod identity agent. So now, if I'm designing this today, here's what I will do. I'll evaluate EKS pod identity first. While IRSA remains a secure and widely used approach, but whichever one you choose, do not stop at authentication. The IAM policy itself should follow least privilege. So don't say because I already gave this pod a pod identity using the identity, the agent or whatever, the worker, whatever it is. No, whatever policy that you are given, it must have or follow the least privilege. So in this application, if it only needs to download objects from one S3 bucket or even one specific prefix In the S3 bucket, don't give it S3 asterisk. Don't give it a wildcard. If it needs to have access to that object in the bucket, don't give it access to the whole bucket. And don't give it access to the whole AWS buckets. Yeah. So give it only the actions and resources that it actually needs. That's the real interview answer. It's not how do I give AWS credentials. No, it's not give it narrowly scoped AWS permission without managing long. No, you have to explain the steps and details gradually. That is the security model that you want to remember. So if I can trace it, I believe that I talked about giving it hard coded secrets, like hard coding the secrets inside of the source code, which is a very bad idea. To not do it, it's the worst. And the next thing is storing the credentials as a Kubernetes secret, because the moment you're able to just get inside of Kubernetes, you can always use the kubectl command to get the secret, and it gives them to you. It's better than hard coding, but it is worse because you have long-lived credential inside of the pod, inside of the environment. And the next option is to give it give the EC2 worker or the agent to give it the node, inside of the node to give it the IAM role. That is good because it's temporary. However, it is still going to not follow the least privilege, because you're giving access to every other pod which is inside of that node, and that violates the security principle that says we do least privilege only. Now, a very strong one is the IAM role for service account, which is that you give an IAM role and it uses that IAM role. Now it assumes the role and it is only given on top of that service account, which allows you to be able to talk to EKS Pod. And however, I did mention that there is a new one which is not particularly new, but it's not something widely used as much. It's the EKS Pod Identity, which simplifies how the IAM roles are associated. So you get the distinction between how the IAM role is associated with the pod. Now, it's not about, while you may want to use the IRSA or you want to use the pod identity, they are both very strong. It's just a matter of preferences. However, you must still follow that thing called least privilege. It's a principle, because you don't want to give a wildcard access to anything, even though this pod can interact inside of a particular bucket or a particular resource in AWS. Doesn't have to be just S3, doesn't have to be it could be any resource whatsoever. You want to give it the restricted, you want to give it a kind of, I call it close marking on how much access that it has, so it's not able to interact with other resources or other objects in the bucket. So I hope this makes a little bit of sense, and I hope you're able to learn a thing or two. And if you do enjoy it, please let me know and give some likes, share some comments, and thank you for this, and cheers. Have a good one.